Cabe & Sullivan, Sullivan Pheasant Farms. What are you holding in your hand?
We've got two juvenile pheasants here. We've got a male and a female, and I was just explaining the difference between the two. At this age, they're just starting to get some of their adult feathering. They're 49 days today, and if you look here on the rooster, you can see these red feathers starting to come in on the breast. The female is lacking a lot of that red pigmentation. A little bit earlier, like a week or two ago, that you wouldn't really see a lot of that. And if you wanted to actually determine the sex of them, you'd actually look at their eye patch, and you take your thumb and push that down, and you can see the wattle starting to develop. That male has a more pronounced wattle, where the wattle is going to be. Females, they don't quite have that. It's less pronounced, and they even have that as day-old chicks. If we pull them out of the hatcher on day one, if we wanted to, we can sex them to about 85 to 90% accuracy, just by pulling that skin flap down and seeing if a wattle is going to be growing there or not.
Now, live weight right now of these birds is about what? Somewhere around a pound?
Yeah, a little less than a pound. Yeah, probably an average through the whole thing. It's probably about 12 to 14 ounces.
Assuming good nutrition, insects, they can fly right now,
yes,
correct?
Yes, they can fly very well right now. Their flying ability starts at about 7 days. They can take short flights. They can start flying. They'll fly about 20 inches off the ground. At this age, I mean, they'll go roost in the top of trees. They've got good flying ability. They're not powerful flyers just yet, as they're just learning to take short flights.
Now, in order to train these birds how to properly use their feathers,
yes,
to be resistant against rain, against moisture, which you don't get with preserve type birds.
Right.
You have to spray them down a couple times a week.
We actually we call it weather conditioning. So after the birds are about 2 weeks old, we'll go into our big brooding barns, and we'll wet the birds down once or twice, a week. Sometimes this group is much better than others because it's been so hot. We've been doing it daily. And what that does, I'll put this one back, but it trains them how to use their uropygial gland. If you've ever seen a bird preening themselves, they'll reach back with their beak, and they'll be touching their beak somewhere around the top of their tail. And what they're doing are taking a little bit of a secretion from a gland back there that produces oil. They call it the uropygial gland, and they're applying it to all their feathers. And what that does, it waterproofs their feathers. Now, most game farm birds haven't been trained how to do that. Their mom in the wild would kind of give them that instruction, and they just don't do it without having the exposure to water on their back. So we start training them at an early age to do that, because the biggest thing, if you take birds like this and put them out in the wild and we get a big rain, they're going to get hypothermic. And even if it's 80 degrees out, they're going to get lots of water on their skin, and that wind is just going to zap the energy out of them, and they're going to get hypothermic and die. So it's important that they've been weather conditioned for a couple weeks prior to release. And
let me ask you, this strain of pheasants is bred to be a heavier bird than what would go to a preserve. Because preserve one size, and they're going to be planted and taken right away.
Right.
But here we're trying to revitalize an already fairly robust natural population.
Well, the bird that we've bred on our farm, we've bred it to be as close to, phenotypically, to the birds that would be, we say indigenous here to Illinois, but we all know, I mean, they were all introduced here from China and Mongolia, which were introduced primarily through European game farm birds. But the birds that would have been here in the 50s and 60s are going to be a bird that is a little bit heavier than people are accustomed to. They've got a feather pattern. It's a little bit more, I guess, it has a less pronounced white ring. It's got a white ring, but it's not quite as wide. And that's what our birds would show. A lot of the game farm strains now are coming from Wisconsin, and they are a direct import bird. It's an F1 generation bird from birds that they imported again. So phenotypically, the color patterns have changed over time, and what we've got is a pheasant that we feel resembles birds from pictures and photographs that I've seen. My grandpa has, my dad, growing up, in the 50s and 60s, that would have been in this area. And the game farm birds today are mostly smaller, and they've done that because they're trying to get a bird that grows faster on less feed, because that's important when you're doing it on a big scale. Our birds are a little bit heavier. People like that because they have a little bit more food on the table when they shoot them, but it does I mean, require a higher investment in feed. Sometimes
it takes longer, and game farms, everything is cost sensitive, so so the lighter birds go for less money, and it's a competitive business.
Right. If they're going to take, they keep the feed content, the calorie content of the feed down too, they can do that.
Now, we're here mid-July. By November, this 1 pound bird should be about what? Assuming
about 3.
About 3 pounds.
Yeah, about 3 pounds.
And max on these birds would be what? 3 1/4, 3 1/2 would be.
Yeah, that'd be a big bird. A big 3 1/4 would be on the high side for the roosters.
Okay, but you're talking about full grown, ready to hunt, certainly ready to reproduce.
Yep.
Absolutely adults, and not possible to tell from the local pheasants from now until November.
Right, right. Well,
Okay.
and we're being releasing these in the same cohort as birds that were hatched in like May. So this was a bird. I think he hatched. Gotta say, he's hatched the 27th of May, I believe. Whatever, it would be 7 weeks ago, so something like that. So they're going to be released, and hopefully, they'll be in that same cohort of early summer birds.
What type of percentage of survival rate, Kevin?
20% survival is what we would hope for.
During a hard release like this?
In a hard release like this, yeah. In a wild situation, the research has shown 30% of birds survive from the day they hatch until the time they're ready to breed the following year. So with released birds, we're hoping if we can obtain a 20% survival rate, we've done a really good job in getting birds that are prepared to live out in the wild and survive. And that's saying that the birds themselves are prepared, they're genetically, prone to survival, and also the habitat is acceptable. Because you could have the very best birds, you could wild catch birds in the Dakotas and release them in poor habitat, and they're going to die. So the habitat and having water and cover for them is just as important as the birds themselves. So that's what we're hoping for, the 20% survival.
And what stressed the pheasant population in northern Illinois, you've got a couple factors, I believe. One is the increase in raptors, hawks, all the goshawks, red-tailed hawks you see all over the place.
Yep.
Since farmers can no longer use DDT, the hawk population has skyrocketed, and there's nothing to control the population of hawks. And commensurately, you get a reduced population of pheasants, more stress on the pheasants, and also since trapping is almost non-existent, particularly raccoons, population of raccoons and of course the regular coyotes combined to put a lot of stress on wild pheasants, plus the consideration of nesting conditions, weather, and especially harsh winter. That takes its toll as well.
The biggest thing it contributes to is habitat loss, is first of all. I mean, habitat loss, all the farmers in the most areas, they farm right to the ditches. That's why properties like this are so unique, is because there's buffer strips, so there's actually habitat for the birds to survive in whenever the weather does get bad. Because it's not June, July, and August whenever the habitat is lacking. It's in December and January and February. So if there are habitat sections like this is important for pheasant survival. Having water on the property is important for survival, and having habitats that aren't fragmented, because you might have a great spot, but then it might be 20 miles before there's any more space available. So habitat is a big factor, but like you said, the hawks and the owls and the raptors that just decimate pheasant populations are higher. Their populations are higher now than they have been historically in the last 50 to 100 years, because of the difference in farming practices and conservation efforts in order to restore those populations, which is a great thing. It's just that game bird populations have suffered. Now, some people would say pheasants are non-natives anyway, so they don't deserve a place on the prairie. That's, a lot of people's argument. So,
well, it's a pretty weak argument because they're such beautiful birds, and tasty too.
And they are a big draw, and an economic advantage for a lot of places for drawing people in for hunting.
So these guys don't seem stressed at all. They're just curious. They're just kind of poking their way out.
Young birds, and so if you take an adult bird and put it out here, first off, it's going to be panicked, and it's going to just be terrified, and it's going to fly for miles. These young birds, you can see they're curious. They still have some of the natural instincts that they hatched with. So they're immediately starting to scratch and look for food and look for water, and they're still like little sponges absorbing their environment. But once they get older, they know where their feeders are at in the pens, they know where the waters are at, and they stop looking. And so they starve to death or dehydrate just because they don't have that curiosity.
Oh, there we go. No, he just flew across. But it's amazing that they're already good flyers.
Yeah, and we actually, so you've seen some of these things where people buy, they put young pheasants out that don't allow them to fly. We actually grow these things out in, I mean, they're 10-foot tall barns that are 30 feet long. And then we actually condition them the last week in a pen that's 12 by 100. So they have plenty of space to fly.
And when's the best time to start placing orders?
Well, for us, the best time to get our orders would be in February, because then we know how many hens we need to hold back. Because to schedule our summer deliveries, we need to hold back hens in February so they start laying eggs in March, April, May. So these chicks we released today were the end of May chicks. So the wheels went into motion back in January and February to get those birds produced.
So making a phone call September 1st isn't very helpful?
No.
Okay, that should wrap it up. Thanks to Caven.
Yep. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate it.
Okay, good job.
And good job to you guys. This place is really nice. I mean, this really is. It's a beautiful, good job to this